He had an envelope. He had a smile I hadn't seen in 7 years. I stood at my front door in my nursing scrubs, still smelling like the hospital, and I looked at my brother's face like he was a stranger, because he was. "Claire," he said, "we need to talk." I almost closed the door. I should have closed the door. But I didn't. And everything that happened after that, every single thing started in that moment. On my porch, on a Tuesday evening in October, when my brother Marcus showed up at my house like the last 7 years hadn't happened. Like he hadn't chosen a cruise ship over my dying husband. Like he hadn't stood in my kitchen in 2017 and told me, with his arms crossed and his voice completely flat, that I needed to figure it out myself. I need to go back. Because if you're going to understand what I did, and why I have zero regrets about it, you need to know everything. My husband's name was Daniel Reeves. He was 31 years old when the doctors found the tumor, and he was the kind of man who remembered every single person's birthday, who kept a running list of his coworkers' coffee orders, so he never had to ask twice, who slow danced with me in the kitchen on random Wednesday nights for no reason except that a good song came on. We had been married for 3 years. We had a daughter named Sophie who was 14 months old and had just learned to wave. The tumor was in his brain. Grade 3 astrocytoma. The neurosurgeon used words like aggressive and complex location and significant risk, and I sat in that consultation room holding Daniel's hand so tight my knuckles went white, and I kept thinking, we don't have the money for this. We don't have the money for this. We were not poor. We were just normal. Daniel was a high school history teacher. I was a registered nurse working at a community hospital 40 minutes from our house. We had a mortgage. We had a 14-month-old. We had exactly $11,000 in savings and a health insurance plan with a $20,000 out-of-pocket maximum that we had not come anywhere close to meeting yet. The surgery alone was going to cost $32,000 after insurance. That was before the radiation, before the follow-up treatment, before the medications that cost $600 a month, that insurance covered at 60%. I did the math on a piece of paper at the kitchen table at 2 a.m. while Sophie slept in her crib and Daniel slept in our bed because the headaches made him exhausted all the time now. I did the math and then I sat there staring at the numbers and I thought, I need help. My parents had money. I want to be clear about that because I think some people assume that when a family doesn't help, it's because they can't. My parents were not struggling. My father had retired at 62 from a career in commercial real estate. My mother had inherited a significant amount from her own parents. They owned their house outright. They had investments. They took a trip every single year, and not a weekend at the beach trip. I mean a real trip. 2 or 3 weeks. International. First class when they felt like it. That year, in the fall of 2017, they had booked a Mediterranean cruise. 30 days. My father had mentioned it at Easter with such obvious excitement, this big loop through Spain and Italy and Greece, and I had thought, good for them. That sounds beautiful. They worked hard, and they deserve it. I called my mother, on a Sunday afternoon in September. Sophie was napping. Daniel was at the kitchen table grading papers because he refused to stop working, refused to let the diagnosis swallow his whole identity, and I loved him so much for that. I told my mother everything. The diagnosis, the surgery, the cost breakdown, the gap we couldn't cover. I told her we needed $25,000. Not as a gift, I said that specifically. As a loan. We would pay it back. I would sign something if they wanted. Whatever they needed. There was a long pause. Claire, my mother said, your father and I have already paid for the cruise in full. The deposit alone was $12,000. I waited. We can't just pull that kind of money out of our investments right now. There are tax implications. I want to tell you that I said something. That I pushed back. That I pointed out that my husband had a brain tumor and their grandchild needed her father, and surely that outweighed tax implications. But I was so shocked that I couldn't speak. I genuinely could not form words for a few seconds. Have you looked into medical financing? She asked. There are programs for situations like this. I got off the phone and sat on the bathroom floor and cried as quietly as I could so Daniel wouldn't hear me. I called my brother Marcus the next day. Marcus was 34 at the time, single, a software engineer making more in 1 year than Daniel and I made combined. He was also going on the cruise with my parents. It was a family trip. A big celebration for my parents' 40th anniversary. I'm really sorry about Daniel, he said. I really am. But Claire, I've had this trip booked for 8 months. I've already requested the time off work. Mom and Dad would be devastated if I canceled. Marcus, I said. Daniel has a brain tumor. I know that. I'm not saying it isn't serious. I'm saying I don't know what you expect me to do about it. I called my in-laws that same night. I want you to know that, because it matters. My father-in-law, Roy, and my mother-in-law, Pat, lived 3 states away, and were not wealthy people. Roy was a retired auto mechanic. Pat worked part-time at a grocery store. They sent us $4,000 every cent they had in savings within 48 hours of me calling them. Pat drove 14 hours to stay with us for 3 weeks so I could keep working and Daniel could rest. She cried when she held Sophie. She cooked enough food to fill our entire freezer. My own parents sent a card. It had a Bible verse on it about strength in difficult times. We took out a medical loan at 11% interest. We drained our savings. Daniel's school held a fundraiser that raised $6,000, and I cried in the parking lot of the school when his department chair handed me the check. Daniel had the surgery in November. It went as well as it could have gone, which meant the surgeon got most of it but not all of it, and the margins were not clean, and we were looking at 6 weeks of daily radiation starting in January. My parents came home from their cruise in December. They came to the house on a Saturday, and my mother brought a poinsettia and a tin of Christmas cookies, and my father shook Daniel's hand and said he looked good. He really did. Better than expected. I walked them to their car when they left. It was cold. I could see my breath. My mother hugged me and said, "You're handling all of this so well, sweetheart. We're so proud of you." I stepped back. I looked at her, and I said, very quietly, "Don't come back." My father started to say something. "I mean it," I said. "Don't call. Don't send cards. We're done." I walked back inside. I locked the door. I sat on the kitchen floor, and I did not cry, which surprised me. I thought I would cry. Instead, I felt something cold and clean settle into my chest, like the decision had been made a long time ago and I was only just catching up to it. Daniel went through radiation. He lost weight. He lost some of his hair. He was exhausted in a way that went all the way down to his bones, but he still sat on the floor with Sophie on Saturday mornings and built towers out of wooden blocks with her. He never stopped being her father, not for one single day. He died in April, 2 years and 4 months after the diagnosis. Sophie was 3 years old. She asked me where Daddy went, and I told her that Daddy was in the sky, and she looked up at the ceiling and said, "That ceiling?" And I said, "Further than that, baby?" And she thought about it for a second and then went back to coloring. I don't talk about those years much. I raised Sophie alone. I picked up extra shifts. I paid off the medical loans by the time she was 5. My in-laws came every summer for 2 weeks, and Sophie called Roy Grandpa Roy and followed him everywhere he went. I built a life. It was smaller than the one I had imagined, but it was real and it was mine, and it had Sophie in it, and Sophie is remarkable. She is 7 now. She reads chapter books. She has her father's handwriting. I did not speak to my parents or my brother for 7 years. And then my brother showed up on my porch with an envelope. I let him in. I don't know why, exactly. Maybe because Sophie was at my in-laws that weekend. Maybe because I had spent 7 years not knowing how this story ended, and some part of me needed to find out. Maybe I was just tired. He sat at my kitchen table. He put the envelope down but didn't open it. He looked older, thinner around the face. "Mom and Dad are gone," he said. I already knew. My mother had passed in June of a stroke. My father followed in September. Heart failure. Fast. I found out from a cousin who texted me. I had not gone to either funeral. I had felt things about that. Complicated things. And I had processed them privately and moved forward. "I know," I said. He nodded slowly. "There's an estate. It's significant." I didn't say anything. Dad had more than we knew about. The house, the investments, a life insurance policy. It totals just under $1.4 million. $1.4 million. I thought about the medical loan at 11% interest. I thought about the $4,000 Roy and Pat had scraped together from their savings account. I thought about Daniel grading papers at the kitchen table because he was not going to let a brain tumor take his identity. "There's a will," Marcus said. He slid the envelope toward me. "You should read it." I opened it. I read it. My parents had left everything to Marcus. Not a portion to me. Not a token amount. Not even a piece of jewelry or a piece of furniture. My name appeared exactly once in the document, in a clause that explained, in formal legal language, that they had chosen to exclude me from the estate due to my decision to sever contact with the family. I set the document down. I looked at my brother. "I came here to ask you to sign a disclaimer," he said. "It just formally confirms that you accept the terms. It would make the probate process cleaner. You want me to sign away any claim I might have. You walked away from them, Claire. That was your choice. I walked away because they let my husband almost die rather than postpone a cruise. They didn't make his medical decisions. That's not fair. They had $1.4 million, and they sent me a card with a Bible verse on it." He looked at his hands. "I'm not here to relitigate the past." "What are you here for, Marcus?" "Because I don't think it's really to make the probate process cleaner. I think you drove 3 hours to my house because you're scared." He didn't say anything. "You're scared because you knew about this will for a while, and you knew I might have grounds to contest it. And you thought if you came here and played the reasonable sibling, I'd just sign the paper and you'd walk away with everything. You don't have grounds to contest it. They had the legal right to leave their estate however they wanted. Maybe. Or maybe my attorney will have a different opinion about that." He picked up the unsigned disclaimer and put it back in the envelope. When he stood up, his chair scraped against my kitchen floor, and I thought about how many times Daniel had sat in that chair. How many dinners. How many early mornings with coffee and the newspaper. How many nights of helping Sophie with her homework at that table after he was gone, just me and her, trying to hold everything together. "Think carefully," Marcus said at the door. "Contesting a will is expensive, and you might not win. You'd be spending money you don't have on a long shot." "You might be right," I said. "But here's the thing, Marcus. I'm not doing this for the money." He looked at me. "I'm doing this so Sophie knows. When she's old enough to understand what happened, when she asks me why she never knew her grandparents, I want to be able to tell her that I fought, that I didn't just sign a piece of paper and let them pretend they had the right to abandon us. The money is secondary. The record is what matters." He left. I watched his car back out of my driveway. And then I called an attorney. Her name is Janet Voss. She came recommended by a colleague at the hospital who had gone through her own nightmare of an estate dispute 2 years prior. Janet is 52 years old, sharp, and deeply unimpressed by situations that are supposed to be intimidating. I liked her immediately. I laid out everything. The timeline, the diagnosis, the request for help, the cruise, the medical loans, the cut contact, the will, the visit from Marcus. Janet listened without interrupting. She took notes. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "I want to be honest with you about what we're working with," she said. "In most states, your parents had the legal right to disinherit you. There's no law that requires a parent to leave anything to a child. I understand. However," she said, and the way she said that word made me sit up straighter. "There are several angles we can look at. One is undue influence, whether Marcus played a role in shaping the will to benefit himself. Another is the timing of the will. When was it last amended?" I didn't know. Janet found out within the week. The will had been amended 14 months before my father died, which meant it had been rewritten years after I cut contact, yes, but also interestingly close to the period when my father's cognitive decline had begun. His primary care physician had noted early signs of confusion at an appointment about 18 months before his death. "That's potentially relevant," Janet said. There was also the matter of a property. My parents owned a small vacation cabin that had been in my mother's family for 3 generations. My grandmother had always intended it to be shared equally between her 2 children and their families. There was correspondence, actual physical letters where my grandmother had expressed this intention. There was no formal legal document, but there was a paper trail. "It's not guaranteed," Janet told me. "But we have something to work with here. Are you prepared for this to take time?" "Yes. And Marcus will fight it." I know. Why are you doing this? She asked. It wasn't a challenge. It was a genuine question, the kind an attorney asks when she needs to know how committed her client is. I thought about Sophie at my kitchen table last month, doing her homework, and how she had looked up at me and asked, out of nowhere, completely unprompted, "Mom, did you have a grandma and grandpa on your side?" And I had said yes, and she had asked why she never met them, and I had said, "That's a long story for when you're older, baby." She had accepted that. 7-year-olds are good at accepting things they can't control, but she won't always be 7. I'm doing it because a version of events exists right now in which my parents made a reasonable choice and I was the one who overreacted, I told Janet. My brother will tell that story. He'll probably tell it to his kids someday. And I need there to be another record. I need there to be documentation that what happened was not okay, that the people who had more money than they could ever spend looked at their son-in-law dying and their 1-year-old granddaughter, and they chose a cruise. I need that to be on record somewhere. Janet nodded. Okay, she said. Then let's build a record. I want to be honest about where things stand right now, because I think you deserve the full picture, and not just the parts that make me look certain and strong. The legal process is slow. It has been 6 months since Marcus came to my door. We have filed a formal contest of the will. Marcus has hired an attorney of his own. There have been depositions. There have been documents requested, and documents produced. There have been weeks where I go to work and take care of Sophie and try not to think about it. And there have been weeks where it occupies every quiet moment I have. My father-in-law Roy called me last month. He had heard, through the family grapevine, what was happening. "Claire," he said, in that particular Roy way he has. Like he is measuring every word before he puts it down. "You don't owe those people anything. But if you're fighting for Sophie, then you fight. You hear me? You fight. I do not know how this ends. I want to be honest about that. Janet has told me our strongest argument is the timing of the will amendment and the documented cognitive decline. She has told me that even if we don't succeed in overturning the will entirely, there may be grounds for a partial claim, particularly regarding the cabin property. What I know is that I am not signing the disclaimer. What I know is that my name is going to be part of this record, one way or another. What I know is that when Sophie is old enough, I am going to be able to tell her. I tried. I documented it. I made them prove they had the right to do what they did. I did not stand in my own driveway and watch them drive away with everything and say nothing. She is 7. She is reading a chapter book about a girl who trains horses. She has her father's handwriting and his laugh and his habit of tilting her head to the side when she is thinking hard about something. She knows that her grandpa Roy would do absolutely anything for her. She knows that her mom works hard and comes home and makes dinner and helps with homework. She knows she is loved in every direction. That is not nothing. In fact, that might be everything. But I'm still fighting. Because she deserves to know that someone fought for her. And because if there is any justice in the world, a 14-month-old who lost her father, a woman who took out loans at 11% interest while her parents packed their bags for Europe, deserves to have her story be more than a line in a disclaimer that her brother had her sign at her own kitchen table. The case is ongoing. My attorney is good. The record exists. And I am not done.